Battlebit Remastered, a small game with like 3 developers, has garnered more popularity and more players than Battlefield 2042, a game in its own genre that is made by EA, a AAA developer. Battlebit's new twist on the Battlefield-esque gameplay, such as adding voice comms, destruction, and all those different things, has basically offered its own niche in the genre, while also pulling players from Battlefield, and from COD, and from other FPS games. Now, I won't have many negative things to say about this game at all. It's my favorite game. I play it all the time now. But as with any video game, there is always room to improve. So in this video, we're going to be discussing some of the things that Battlebit Remastered can do to improve their product, some of the things that they might want to consider in future updates, and some of the balancing that should maybe take place in the game or be considered or looked at least. They don't have to take my ideas, but I think they should look at some of these things. And Battlebit has shown a willingness to listen to community feedback, implement changes at a rapid rate, more rapid rate than these AAA companies, and just accept community feedback all around. So in this video, I'm going to avoid talking about specific weapons because I think that's its own separate video, and honestly, I think the gunplay is pretty fun and pretty balanced in this game overall. I think most weapons are viable. There's just a few of them that are pretty but I think that's a whole separate video to talk about weapons specifically. I think the gunplay is not that big of a problem in Battlebit at the moment. In this video, we're going to be talking about ideas for balancing classes, for making other classes other than medic more viable, which Battlebit's already taken a stab at a few weeks ago, and we're going to be talking about AR and SMG viability. We're going to be talking about vehicles, and we're going to be talking about some ideas to buff some different classes that are underused, as I said, and maybe adding some different gadgets and guns to the game. The reason I bring up class viability is because Battlebit recently took a stab at this with an update that says, hey, all classes can heal now. You don't necessarily need a medic to heal yourself. You can bandage yourself and it'll restore like I think 40 health or something like that, which is a very good update, and it made other classes more viable, but I feel like the medic class is still overused. And you can't really nerf the medic class because you need medics to be strong, to resupply your infantry force, and to keep them alive and pushing the battle and progressing the battle. If medics were weak, everybody would just be dying. The game would be over in like 10 minutes. So you need strong medics. So the other solution is to buff other classes that are underused. And I think the first class that should be looked at is Assault. Yes, Assault is arguably pretty strong in comparison to other classes not named Medic. Like, it has faster reload, faster ADS, and a few other perks, but it's still underused for people who are aggressive players. I feel like the class of choice for aggressive players right now is Medic, because you can push headfirst into battle, use SMGs, use ARs, and you can heal yourself at a rapid rate. So why would you use Assault when you're going to be taking damage and you need to be able to heal yourself? And 4 bandages for Assault is simply not enough to do that, and Assault doesn't even have access to the SMG class. Here's how I would change the Assault class. I would do 3 things. First is I would award Assault bonus XP per elimination. The Medic class gets bonus XP for reses, for bandages, for heals, and the Engineer class gets bonus XP for destroying vehicles. So I think if you give the Assault class bonus XP per elimination, then it will incentivize people to use the class more when leveling up, and incentivize people to be more aggressive with the Assault class. Right now, I feel like the Assault class is used more like a support class. It's used to sit back on a bridge and spray with your AR from 75 to 100 meters away. It's not really used as the class is intended, which is to lead the battle head first, and to capture points and create space for your medics to come in and backfill and res people and heal people. Right now, the medic class is the class that is doing that. The medic class is the class with SMGs, ARs, movement, heals, full sprinting ahead, and just destroying people and creating the space that the Assault class should be creating. So you need to incentivize people to use this class, and one of the ways to do that is XP, obviously, but that is not enough alone. I think the Assault class should be able to use SMGs, but it's literally in the name Assault that they should be assaulting positions and taking close quarters engagements, and I think affording the Assault class, the SMG class, which is one of the fastest time to kill classes with some of the lowest recoil best weapons in the game, is one way to do that, and it would still be decently balanced because they don't have that many bandages. They have 4, I'm going to propose 6, but they still can't heal themselves indefinitely like medics can. If you're going to give medics the most OP weapons in the game and they can indefinitely heal themselves when they take damage, I think that's pretty broken. I'm not saying you should take the SMGs away from medics because they're going to be in close quarters engagements a lot when they're healing and rezzing people, but I think the Assault class should have the SMG class available to them in weapons. And the third thing I would do is I would give the assault class 6 bandages. So if you're going to say, hey, the assault class should be pushing into battle head first, they should be clearing space, capturing objectives, you're basically saying, hey, you're going to also have to put yourself at more risk of taking damage. And 4 bandages just simply isn't enough for these circumstances. I find myself using the assault class, and when I try to push people and I get like several kills in a row, I'm out of bandages already. And then my teammate's like, hey, res me. And I'm like, I have no bandages, or I have 1 bandage left and I'm not going to use it on you because I'm about to take more damage. And so it's a problem where you have to use like 2 bandages to heal yourself to full health once you're bleeding. So you basically are saying you can only take damage like 3 times as an assault class. Actually 2 times as an assault class. And so I think if you afford them 6 bandages, it gives them a little more wiggle room to say, hey, yeah, you still have to be smart about, hey, how you position yourself and make sure you're not taking excessive amounts of damage, but it gives them more wiggle room to heal themselves up a few times and maybe res a teammate or 2 here and there, because as of right now, having 4 bandages as a class, any class really, is not incentivizing people to res their teammates. I know that's the job of medics, but let's face it, medics don't always res people. There's not always a medic around to res a teammate, and if I have like 1 bandage left and a teammate's screaming for me to res them, how much incentive do I really have to use that bandage on them? And having 4 bandages in total, it's like sometimes I use all 4 of those bandages in the first 30 seconds to a minute of my life, depending on when I spawn. Yes, sometimes I don't really have to use many of them at all, but a lot of times you find yourselves just using those bandages. So give them 6 bandages, because if they're going to be pushing headfirst into battle, they're going to need to be able to get their comrades up, they're going to need to be able to heal themselves, and they're going to need to be able to have a little wiggle room to get into some of those more aggressive engagements. A lot of people think the support class needs a buff, because they're like, hey, it's underused. But listen, the reason the support class is underused right now is simply because the medic class is just so much better, and people are using the assault class as a support class right now. So here's how you would fix the support class. I think if you rework the assault class to be more aggressive, then the support class would then become more viable for, hey, on Walkie-Stan or those maps, sitting at a position with an LMG like an M249 and spraying away at the enemy. Right now, people are using assault rifles for that. I think that if you buffed the assault class to make it so the assault class is more aggressive, then the support class would become that more passive aggressive, sit back on the back lines, resupply your teammates kind of class, which it already is, but there's not much incentive to use it right now. The main incentive to use the support class right now is it has the strongest armor in the game, and that's a big incentive, but you also have to consider the drawbacks of the class. So what I would do is I would buff the amount of XP that, I know support gets XP per resupplies, but I would buff the amount of XP they get per resupplies, and then they're also adding a bunch of new LMGs to the game, so I think that will take care of the support class usage in and of itself, because if they add new LMGs to the game and they're very strong and the support class is the only class that can use them, people are going to gravitate to that class more just to use the new weapons, and if the new weapons are OP, then they're going to use that class much more. So I think that just adding new LMGs that are strong, that can compete, that are similar to the M249 or just high damage, low fire rate LMGs, I think that just adding new guns to that class in general, whether they're strong or not, is going to gravitate more people to that class. And if you give them a little bit bonus XP for some different actions, and you say, hey, we're showing you some love, and they've already reduced the movement penalty for certain attachments on certain weapons, and they're looking at movement in the game, so I think that they're already starting to tweak things related to that class. So there's not much I would touch in that class right now, but it's definitely something that does need to be looked at. The engineer class is one of the most underused classes in the game, in my opinion, and it should have a very high use case, as there's always a use for someone who can take vehicles out. You get bonus XP for vehicle elims, and you can use marksmen as that class. Granted, marksmen aren't that strong, but it's still a perk of the class. Also, if you are using a vehicle, you can repair your vehicle as an engineer. So I'm not quite sure why people don't use engineer that much. My main reasoning is that the medic class is so strong, and that if you want to use something that's beefy, you go support, and then if you want to use something that's not medic, that's aggressive, you go assault. And then if you obviously if you want to kit back with a sniper, you use recon. So the use case for engineer is basically someone who's driving a vehicle, or someone who's just really pissed off at vehicle users and wants to go take them out, which is fair enough. That's kind of what the class is designed to do, but I think that there's some things that they can do to make the class used a little bit more. I think if they add different gadgets to the class, like I'm going to propose later in the video an anti-tank rifle that is exclusive to the engineer class, different kinds of RPGs to the class, that sort of thing, it'll go up. Like marksmen, I think, are a huge thing that is underused and under OP in this game. Like the M110 and a few marksmen are decent, but I think that how do you increase the usage of the engineer class is if you make marksmen more viable, because they have more health than a recon class. So if marksmen are good, and if I want to use a marksman, then I'll just go engineer instead of recon, right? And right now, there's not much reason to do that because the HP buff for healing and all of that makes it so there's not many people who are one-tappable anymore with a marksman, right? It used to be with a marksman, everybody's like not 100 HP because they can't heal themselves, so you could just go around one-tap people, right? But it's not that way anymore because you can heal yourself with bandages. So they need to maybe look at buffing marksmen a little bit. It's a touchy game because if you buff them too much, it makes snipers not viable. But I think that they need to look at either buffing the bullet velo, the fire rate, lowering the recoil, something like that. Maybe not necessarily lowering the or increasing the damage per bullet, but maybe looking at something like that with marksmen. And lastly, the recon class, I'm not too worried about. I think its usage is just fine. It's always going to have a niche. Snipers are decently strong in this game. They have decent bullet velocity. They kill in one shot to the head. The M200 one-shots people with exo armor. I think sniper class is one of the classes in this game that doesn't really need to be touched that much. That being said, if there's one thing I could do to the classes, if I'm proposing all these different XP buffs for different classes for certain things within their niche, then I think the sniper class should get bonus XP for one-tap headshots to the head. Only one-tap headshots to the head with a sniper rifle. I think that'd be a good way to incentivize people to, hey, aim for the head more often and play within the niche of your class more. And hey, if you want to get XP, you can still play the recon class, you know? So before we move on to talking about vehicles, I want to talk about the viability of assault rifles in the game and SMGs as well. I mean, SMGs are way too viable, one would say. So ARs in this game, most of them have a fall off after like 75 to 100 meters. That is pretty steep. Some of them are a little bit, they don't fall off that steeply until like 150, like the AK-15 and the AUG A3 and the SCAR H and stuff. But most assault rifles fall off at like 75 to 100 meters. And so there's not that much incentive to use them over SMGs in this game. SMGs usually typically have like a 50-meter range in this game, 50 to 75 now, unless you're using like a Chris Vector or something like that. They typically have good range, like just look at the MP5 for instance. So if I want to use an assault rifle for mid-range, I'll just pick up an MP5 or a P90, and there's not really much incentive for me to use an M4, for me to use an SG550, for me to use an ACR, AK5C, right? So there's two routes they could take on this, and one is to buff the range of assault rifles. So like all the ARs that have a range of 75 to 100 meters right now, buff the range to 150 to 200 or 125 to 150, and all the ARs that have a 150 to 200 meter range right now, buffing those to 200 to 250. That could work, I think, definitely, because you know, ARs would be more viable at range. You would then have to lower the recoil slightly on them to make them sprayable at those ranges. And I mean, that's not really the point of this game. I think that Battlefield and Battlebit, typically with ARs, you're more tap firing, right? That's just how it goes at range. So I'm not quite sure I would want to go the Call of Duty route with assault rifles. I think the better thing to do would be to take the Chris Vector route and nerf the range of SMGs slightly. I think SMGs should have a little bit of a range nerf from like 50 to like 40-ish meters, right? And I think that would make ARs a little bit more viable, 35 to 40 meters. And I know, like, the thing with SMGs is, like, it's very nice to have them and be able to have mobility and be able to turn and spray somebody at mid-range when you're in a pinch. So I don't want to take that away from the class entirely, but I also think that the assault rifle class is just super, super underutilized, and there's not much incentive to use it at the moment. So how you would tackle that is just a very difficult problem for me. Because it could get very touchy if you buff the range too much of assault rifles, you make LMGs not viable, and if you give them a lot less recoil, then you just make the game like Call of Duty. So the more optimal route to me would be to slightly nerf SMG range, or to increase base recoil of all SMGs in the game. Because let's face it, SMGs don't have that much recoil in this game. The MP7 has a little bit, but like the MP5, the PP19, the P90s, a PDW, but I consider it an SMG because I'm used to considering it one. All those SMGs, the UMP, don't have recoil at all pretty much. They're just beams. So maybe you increase the horizontal recoil of those weapons a little bit and you don't need to mess with the range then. I think that's a pretty viable option. Okay, vehicles in Battlebit. They're a little bit too broken right now, and I don't want people to think that I want vehicles removed from the game, because that's simply not the case. I think vehicles are a very good part of this game, and they add variability to the game. I mean, they're half responsible for the building destruction, and that's also a variable, like, unique mechanic to the game. And without vehicles, this game would basically be Call of Duty Ground War, right? It'd just be glorified Call of Duty, and that's not the point of the game. So vehicles need to be viable. That said, do you really need to get sniped from, like, several thousand meters away by a vehicle from across the map with perfect accuracy while you're moving in one shell or in one spray from a heli, like, maybe not. I think a good thing to do would be to add a cooldown to like vehicles that you can spray heavily with, and add that cooldown and make it pretty severe, where if you're just spraying wildly and you're not hitting your shots, you have to wait a few seconds before you can shoot again, and then you expose yourself to snipers, to RPGs, and all of that. And vehicles like tanks that fire shells, I think maybe slow the fire rate a little bit of those. Or you could take the route that I want to take, which is to buff the engineer class and give them an anti-tank rifle. And this anti-tank rifle would have to shoot extremely slowly. It would have to not do that much damage to players because I want to add it as a gadget, not as a sniper rifle. I want to add it as a gadget for the engineer class. I don't think it should be usable that much against players. I want to use this thing against tanks and vehicles. And what I would do with it is I'd make it have high damage and slow fire rate. And I would make vehicles have critical spots where if you hit that spot on the vehicle with an anti-tank rifle, it does bonus damage. So essentially, if you hit the wheels of a car with the anti-tank rifle, it would disable the vehicle per se. If you hit the helicopter in the rotors, it would maybe disable the heli, or you would have to hit it 2 or 3 times there to disable the heli entirely. But maybe it would affect the performance of the helicopter in some way. If you hit tanks in specific spots, it would maybe do bonus damage there. Obviously, tanks are supposed to be tanky, so you'd probably have to use a bunch of shots to disable a tank or something like that. I say disable because I think that disabling a vehicle should be a thing, because then it would also incentivize engineers who are driving vehicles to be able to repair that vehicle. I think adding a mechanic like disabling a vehicle into Battlebit would be pretty cool, because you could have then engineer with his anti-tank rifle disable a vehicle but not blow it up entirely, and then either A, that engineer's team runs up with C4s while the vehicle's disabled and blows it up, or B, the engineer that is driving the disabled vehicle gets to repair his own vehicle and make it usable again. Another route they could take, which I wouldn't be entirely a fan of, would be to nerf vehicle base health, and I think doing this would just make them not viable, because if you nerf the vehicle base health, I think people are just going to focus vehicles instantly the second they enter the battlefield, and that'll be that. So I don't think nerfing the vehicle base health is that great of an option in the game. Something else they could do to sort of tweak with vehicles a little bit and make more counters to them would be to buff the grenade damage to vehicles. Like, with the trophy system in the game right now, it's kind of nerfed grenades a little bit, but grenades are extremely strong still, don't get me wrong. But the fact that you can throw a grenade and get a 1 damage hit marker on a tank or on a car doesn't sit right with me. I'm not saying you should be able to blow them up in 1 grenade or 2 grenades, but you should be able to deal chunky damage to vehicles if you hit them directly with a grenade. So I think add that. Another thing they could do would be to add like a lock-on missile, but this would have to be done extremely right, because if done wrong, it would be the Joker meta in Warzone all over again. So if they did a lock-on missile, it would have to have an extremely slow fire rate. It would have to like two tap vehicles, not 1 tap them. It would have to not be able to lock onto infantry, and it would also have to have a small splash damage radius, because you don't want that thing landing and blowing up like 50 people around it. So that I'm a little bit hesitant on, but they could add that to the engineer class and say, hey, if you're an engineer and you're sitting in the hills, you see a vehicle across the map, lock onto that thing 2 or 3 times and it's gone. That's basically what I would do to tackle some of the current problems in Battlebit. I'm going to make a separate video about like how I would tackle and buff some of the like bad worst weapons in the game, specifically weapon by weapon. But the purpose of this video is pretty general, so that's what I would do to sort of like fix some of the things in the game that I don't really like that much or that could change. But I want to make it very clear that I'm not complaining about the game. I love Battlebit. It's my favorite game. I play it every single day, and props to the developers for how good of a product they've put out. Really, the issues I have with the game are very small in comparison to the issues that exist with AAA titles like Call of Duty and Battlefield. So I want to make that clear. Thank you to the Battlebit devs for putting out such an amazing product and continuing to listen to your community. Appreciate it a lot. And thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought about some of my suggestions in the comments. Keep it civil, as always. And let me know what you would do to change some of the classes, change some of the weapons, change how some things work in the game. Let me know what your issues are with the game, if any, currently. And let me know how you would go about resolving those. Again, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more Battlebit videos, and I'll see you next one.